Lauren Boebert, who's holding our government hostage right now. She says that she's pro-life, and yet she's voted against things like funding WIC. Why were coal jobs good jobs? Why were jobs in the oil industry good jobs? Because they're union jobs. Let's make sure that the very, very wealthy people are paying their fair share. You're also seeing this rollback on child labor laws. It doesn't matter how, progressive Colorado wants to be. Everywhere could become Texas.
I am here with Trisha Calvarese, a Democratic candidate running to be in the House of Representatives representing Colorado's 4th District, notably the one that Lauren Boebert switched over to in hopes to save her political career. Now, Trisha, before we address the elephant in the room, could you give us a brief rundown on your background and what you believe makes you the right candidate to move Colorado forward in 2024?
I would love to. And thank you so much for having me on your channels. So my name's Trisha Calvarese. Pronouns are she, her. I'm a Colorado native. And so I grew up in Colorado I was raised in Douglas County. I went to the public schools, which earned me a full academic scholarship to the Johns Hopkins University. But then I didn't become a doctor, and I did graduate into the worst economy since the Great Depression. And this was due to the Wall Street greed, gambling with our livelihoods, and gambling on mortgages. So I was able to talk myself into becoming Senator Sanders' very first press intern. And that has just completely shaped my career in the cause for economic justice. I've worked on tons of campaigns, and I recently returned home after working at AFL-CIO, which is the largest organization of working people and unions in the world, and as a federal civil servant. I recently returned home to Highlands Ranch, my hometown, to provide end-of-life care for my parents. I am the best person for this job because I'm the only person who has shaped landmark legislation. I'm from the district, and I was born the same week Lauren Boebert was, all right? That she was born in Florida, I was born in Colorado. So I think folks would also love to see us debate, but that's just my opinion. So you tell me.
I personally would love to see you guys debate. You did briefly touch on landmark legislation that you worked on. Could you kind of go in maybe one or two of those that you've done and why you think they're important?
I would love to. Thank you so much for this question. I think that this is going to be a challenge for every Democrat running in 2024. So because MAGA has been so disruptive and we know they're about to shut the government down. But if we kind of zoom back to even 2020, we were able to pass landmark legislation, including the bipartisan infrastructure law, which in my district in Colorado 4 is bringing really important infrastructure investments like rural broadband. There's still counties in my district that do not have access to the internet, which is hurting people's access to healthcare. It's hurting students. But then there's also the Inflation Reduction Act, which is poised to bring $13 billion, okay, that's with a B, $13 billion to Colorado in the next 6 years to make us a world leader in renewable energy transmission and storage. And so I'm running to bring those investments to our district. There's also another piece of landmark legislation is the Chips and Science Act. And there was recently an award to make Colorado a regional innovation engine in climate. So that means there's 80 million on the table for startup companies. So if you want a climate startup, right, for mitigation, for getting carbon into the soil, methane monitoring, for growing crops, there is money. There's money available. That's why I'm running. I want to help bring this to our constituents. You're not hearing it right now because Ken Buck, a Republican, certainly isn't going to advertise or help connect these investments to our people. And neither will Lauren Boebert, who's holding our government hostage right now.
And speaking of Lauren Boebert, we don't have to open the entire can of worms, so to speak, but to go ahead and address it from the start, what are your thoughts on her switching to your district? Does it change your game plan on how you campaign? And how do you differentiate yourself from somebody who does have the name recognition, at least, of a Lauren Boebert?
Yeah, absolutely. So Lauren Boebert got into this race before I did, before I was able to announce, because I was leaving the federal government, which took a little bit. So I think she's so much more vulnerable. I don't think she knew that she was going to go up another millennial woman, especially with abortion on the ballot, with healthcare on the ballot, with democracy on the ballot. So she thought that she made a mistake. long and the short of it, right? But at the same time, I look forward to representing her and her family in Colorado for her. I had amazing educational opportunities, and I look forward to her having the same opportunities for her sons. And I think that what really does separate me from other folks in this race, and I would say Lauren on the other side too, is that we are representing a new generation of leadership, which really is sorely needed in Washington on all sides.
So, having worked in the federal government yourself and having a bit of experience on the inner workings, and with how things are looking right now, where a government shutdown could be inevitable, and it's largely responsible to Republicans like Lauren Boebert or MAGA, who more play the role of obstructionists, could you kind of explain why a government shutdown is something we should be avoiding, and how you would stand up to prevent that from happening?
I mean, absolutely. Our taxpayer dollars, our dollars, your dollars, go to folks like Lauren Boebert, and their number one job is to come up with a budget for the federal government. So that's everything from Medicare, like your payments, your Social Security payments for seniors, our payments and our health care for veterans. Those things are already being affected. Or even in my district, where we have farmers who have all kinds of crop insurance and different pieces like farm loans, those things are now in question because we're not funding the federal government. And as somebody who's worked on the inside, I sure can tell you, when you don't know if it's going to be funded or not, you have to stop the work that you're supposed to do, come up with contingency plans, and it's incredibly wasteful. It's the opposite of efficiency. So I am running for an efficient government that, one, like, returns dollars where we can to the middle and working class, right? Like, let's make sure that the like very, very wealthy people are paying their fair share, and for a government that functions for all of us. I mean, it's for the people, by the people, and it should certainly function for the people.
Perfect. Yeah. And I know that your campaign probably is still a little fresh in terms of getting started, but having also, lived in Colorado, been around the area for a while, what do you think the main issue you're hearing from voters is, and how would you plan to address that?
I would say it really is healthcare, economic opportunity, and housing. We're looking at an aging population that's really worried about like their access to healthcare for elder care, but also of retrofitting our houses so that they can stay in place and that they can age with dignity. So that's a big piece of it. There's also a mental health care crisis. I'm hearing this from Republicans, Democrats, from people all across the spectrum. We simply don't have a mental health care system in America. It's just completely missing. So shoring up, I would say those investments in healthcare are absolutely critical. And the last thing, of course, is jobs. We're seeing in places like Douglas County, which is a pretty affluent suburb, folks are experiencing tech layoffs because of AI. This is the era of artificial intelligence, and it is having a real effect. I don't think it's really hit the media yet because the jobs numbers still look very good, but we need representatives who understand that it's coming, and that a whole new kind of sector of worker, of these white collar workers, are going to need protections, workforce protections that you maybe have in more of the blue collar jobs where you have union representation. So I'm very excited to help step up and lead specifically in that space.
Awesome. Yeah, I was looking into it and I saw that minimum wage in the state of Colorado is or just over $14 an hour. Is that around an amount you support? Do you think it should be higher, lower? Where's your stance on that issue? And on top of that, how would you ensure that these kinds of quality jobs are coming back to the state?
I mean, I think that it needs to be higher with inflation, right? Like, it's a good starting point, but honestly, I would say it needs to be even higher. I think the important thing is making sure we're going to look at these government investments in our clean energy future and make sure that they're good union jobs, right? Like, why were coal jobs good jobs? Why were jobs in the oil industry good jobs? Because they're union jobs. So we need to make sure that we're removing the barriers so that jobs in the clean energy and green energy space can unionize, can for union jobs, and they can make those excellent jobs for the sustainable future. That's a huge, like a very big piece. So that's one part of it. The other part of it, I would say, is we need places where people can upskill and reskill. so that folks are not completely at the mercy of changing technologies, where there's a place where no matter where you are in your career, right, if you're having kids and you're going to take some time off for that, or you're going to care for family, where you can come back and you can onboard and you can, again, upskill, reskill, and you can get onto the pathway to an excellent family supporting career. Because that's the thing is you see at Amazon or some of these other companies, they offer training, which is really, they'll pay you pennies to do the work for them. You're not getting paid your full what you're doing, the actual work, and it doesn't lead to a career. Whereas the union model is much different. So I think we need one of those for AI and for the industries of the future.
Yeah, and the statistics bear out a lot of the benefits of unions, whereas states with higher union memberships see higher wages, even higher people insured in terms of healthcare. But having worked firsthand with unions yourself and companies such as, could you kind of explain the benefits of union and just union presence in states?
Oh, I love it. I'm so glad you asked that. And I even know it personally. It's life-changing to be in a union that has healthcare, right? I was able to leave my government job to come home and provide 24/7 end of life care for my mom and then my dad, because I knew my union would have my back. I knew AFGE would go to bat for me. I knew that they would make sure that I got paid for it, that we would even, there was like a leave donation system. Like they were wonderful. And I didn't even think twice about it. It is truly life changing. And I think that the power is so concentrated at the top, right? Like there's going to be a sizable amount of our GDP that's even just going to be inherited, so that not that these folks earned, that just because their parents are so rich, are already billionaires and are just going to hand it over to this next generation of billion and trillionaires, that how on earth do you balance that? Right? There's no way you can balance it unless it's collective. And where do people meet? It's in the workplace. So the collective power of working people to be able to stand together on a job, to say we're going to make this job better, we're going to speak up for ourselves, and to be able to collectively bargain together is life-changing. It's amazing. So I saw it elect the Biden-Harris administration. I saw it literally win protections for working people during COVID. You had nurses on the front lines in trash bags. Unions changed it. Unions made like safer like staffing hours, made it safer for patients, made it so that they had PPE. Like unions can, so they're also life-saving, life-changing and life-saving is what I would say. And they're not folks, sometimes people think of like a union, they think of like, oh, my grandpa was working in the, whatever industrial kind of process, which those are still very important, but it's also industries of the future. It's the biggest organization of people of color and working women in the country. And it represents jobs at every level in every single sector. You got engineers, you got, people who work on rocket ships, people who work in diners. You have all across the spectrum. So I'm excited to see unions move into new spaces too, especially in the tech sector.
Yeah, and a lot of how you see it, like you said, in industries of the future, like with the SAG-AFTRA and the writer's
Yeah.
strike, how they were able to guarantee a lot of protections for the actors when it comes to AI in terms of using them down the line or their likeness and getting compensated for that. I did want to ask you a bit of a sidebar. What's your thoughts on how Biden has been on labor? I know for me, he has surprised me a bit with how pro-labor he's been with some of his NLRB board appointees, the card check certification stuff he's done, going on the picket line with the UAW. What is your thoughts? Having more experience, has he been surprisingly pro-labor to you?
I mean, I think that this is actually something like to unions' credits. Like they called him out. They called him the most like pro-union like president, which is a pretty high bar. And I think he has like lived up to it. Where exactly like you said, he was the first president in United States history to join a strike line with UAW. I think that is amazing. So that I think he definitely has lived up to it. I think that also the like NLRB has been really great, but I think there's a long way to go yet. We still need to pass the like PRO Act. We really need to reform labor law. So in Colorado, for example, a very progressive state, they have what's called the Labor Peace Act. It sounds very nice, but it's totally right to work just by a different name. And so we have a long way to go yet, especially on federal policy, state policy. But I give Biden pretty good remarks. And just in contrast, right? Like Donald Trump will put workers, our unions, at risk. And especially for AFGE, for that union, like he will destroy that union. So for folks who are kind of on the line for that, if you're pro-union, like you got to vote for Biden.
Yeah, and back focusing on your campaign and the issues at hand for you, one of the more hotbed issues right now is women's reproductive rights and their battle for them, I guess, so to speak, something that Lauren Boebert is very much for limiting. Now, in Colorado, abortion is currently legal, though I think 80% of counties don't have clinics to perform these procedures. Where do you fall on the issue, and do you think that this should be something that is more accessible for those who need it?
Well, so that's the thing about a federal ban. It doesn't matter how, progressive Colorado wants to be. Everywhere could become Texas or Alabama. And that's what's so very terrifying. So I am 100% like pro-choice, and we need federal protections for reproductive freedoms, reproductive rights, for abortion rights, and to protect providers. Exactly like you pointed out, when you have abortion restrictions in places like Texas, in rural communities that are already underserved, you get doctors who are going to be afraid to provide care, and they're going to leave, leaving those communities even more starved for care. And that's how women end up in such dangerous situations. And you have women literally dying preventable deaths. And I just want to like point to, so that's absolutely one reason like I am running. Lauren Boebert has been so terrifying. She says that she's pro-life, and yet she's voted against things like funding WIC, which provides life-saving supplemental nutrition for women, their infants, their children. So I don't know how you can call that pro-life, but I'm running to restore our abortion rights, reproductive rights. But then more than that, if you kind of look at Texas, right, and you look at some of these other states, this is such an overreach. It feels like an East Germany, like a Stasi style, where like the bounty laws in Texas, where anybody can sue a person who gets an abortion for money, for personal money. They could sue the person, the birthing person, their partner, the Uber driver, for a profit. Turning right neighbor against neighbor, partner against partner. That is a kind of slide toward fascism that should alarm everybody, absolutely everyone. So that is a huge reason why I'm running, and what is a major contrast between me and somebody like Lauren Boebert.
A follow-up question that I've been asking people, regardless of what side of the issue that they fall on, is about things like, and you kind of pointed to it with WIC and how pro-life people are want to defund things like it, are about universal pre-K, universal childcare for working parents, and the free school lunch program that we've seen lots of states opt into. However, most pro-life states don't offer any of these things, despite the statistical benefits that you can see them providing. Are these things that you could see yourself voting for if they came across your desk?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And even more than that, I would also, you in these like quote unquote, like pro-life kind of agendas, you're also seeing this like rollback on child labor laws. So it's almost like they want people who are poor and desperate to have more people who are poor and desperate so they can exploit them for labor. So that I would also introduce labor protections for children, especially migrant children who are in our district and who are being exploited in places like our meat packing facilities and our sanitation facilities. Our Department of Labor literally just found like a very big firm guilty of using child labor in Colorado in our meat packing industry. And that's just completely unacceptable. So yes, and even more than that, absolutely.
And a lot of the child labor stuff kind of goes into immigration, in my opinion. I think the way that the backlash that we would get economically from limiting immigration, the way that Republicans want, I think they're trying to like preempt that with child labor. They'll be the ones that can fill the jobs that immigrants are currently filling, because they're working their ways to try and restrict that as much as they can. However, I did want to jump to Colorado education, where in the state of Colorado, scores do hover around around the national average, though they have been kind of on the decline. In some places, they are still above the national average. The main issue in the state seems to be with staffing, where in 178 districts, not a single one was fully staffed in 2023. And Colorado also spends well below the national average on its school system, and it's been losing billions of dollars in funding over the last couple of years. What would you do to look within the state to ensure that staffing and funding are staying up to par with the surrounding states?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we need to limit, there's a huge kind of like libertarian Koch brothers like funded push to just drain public dollars from public schools and to put them in these just like ridiculous kind of like charter schemas. Now, that's not to say that like, kids with different learning styles or different needs should not have access to that, but especially with the Department of Education and AI, I think that it's time to kind of overhaul our education system in America. There is no reason that every single person in America, regardless of their zip code, shouldn't have access to the best education in the world, period. Especially with our STEM, that's science, technology, engineering. What's the other one? It's the whole thing, right? With STEM. We need to start training our kids on that earlier with new and different skills. And again, upskilling and reskilling, but that should be universally accessible to anybody, regardless of your zip code. So I think that we need to kind of like be real with ourselves. After 3 years of kids losing, a traditional education during COVID, we need to back up, look at where we are, assess where we are, see where we need to go, and give that to our teachers. That's the other thing. Our teachers are so overdue for a raise where they can't even support their own families and they are doing more than the work of just a teacher, right? Where they have to, spend their own personal expense, like their own personal finances to help like run their classes, and how much extra work they had to take on during the pandemic. Teachers need a raise. That needs to be a much better paid job. We need to invest in that infrastructure, no doubt. And then I would also say we do need to do a better job connecting our education system to better employment outcomes, starting even in high school. So that's, again, pro-union. I'm going to say the trades need to be in our high schools from the get-go. And folks need to understand that is a completely viable pathway. The friends I know, right, who are like, plumbers, pipe fitters, they're doing amazing. And they're looking at things like retirement. They have things like a pension, right? Which, do we even know what that is? If you're like under the age of 40, like very few of us even know what it is. It's amazing. So I think bringing in the trades earlier as well to our education system and being more creative with the earn while you learn models as well.
What are your thoughts on a program like school choice, where I'm not as sure how prevalent it is in Colorado, but where in Indiana, it's caused quite a few problems, honestly, directing money away from public schools into private schools. And I don't have the exact statistics in front of me, but what you see in a lot of cases with school choice is most of the money is going to kids who are already in private schools. It's going to wealthier families. It's staying in wealthier districts. So I always like to ask candidates what their thoughts are on school choice overall.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it's going to like, I'm very nervous about this slide towards Christian nationalism that we're seeing. So when that kind of money goes, especially towards kind of those schools, I get very, very nervous about it. I think just public money should stay in public schools, and we need to invest in our public school teachers.
Yeah, and I think that's the easiest answer. Directing money away from something that's underfunded is never going to solve the issue,
Exactly.
especially when you're directing it to things like you said that are like Christian nationalists, anti-LGBTQ, and a lot of these schools also that receive this school choice funding close within 3 to 5 years of receiving it. So it seems more like a money grab more than anything else. I wanted to, before we wrapped up the conversation, I wanted to give you the floor if you wanted to shout out your website, maybe any events you were planning, anything that people should be in the know about, any issues that we haven't touched on yet. The floor is yours to let people know.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. There is so much opportunity on the table to bring to Colorado, to our different states. And I know, like, you hear every politician say it every single election, right? This is the most important election of our lifetime. But I sincerely think if we get this wrong, this is our last election. Like, this is it. This is the end of democracy. So, I mean, that's why I'm stepping up, and we have a real opportunity to flip this seat. There have been so many people in the rural communities in my district who have been left out and left behind for decades of offshoring and outsourcing, who've just seen their sources of income dry up. And now there's these investments on the table. And with the right representative who actually cares, who's from the district, who's willing to like get in there and to connect those investments to our communities, we could see a real revitalization. We can grow more food. We can lift up farmers. I mean, we can revitalize these rural communities that have just experienced such horrible, like, just kind of brain drain and decline for so long. So that's why I'm running. We're so overdue for our Medicare for all, and also to stop the backslide of our civil rights, especially as a young woman. And that's why I'm stepping up. I'm from Colorado 4. My website is Trisha 4. That's the number 4, Colorado.com. I do need to catch up to her Dark Money Network. She has a ton of fundraisers, right? So please, anything you can like pitch into my campaign would mean the world. Even if it's just $4, we can win this seat. We can win this seat. We have the investments. We have the vision. We're not just running against her. It's what we're running for. And we're running for the people in District 4 in Colorado's 4th Congressional District. So thank you so much for having me. You're amazing. And like, I'm so excited by like the young folks in our country, like game on. It's going to be a bright future because of people like us. So thank you.
No, thank you for what was really a invigorating conversation. And guys, remember, if you were excited by anything she said, Trisha 4, the number 4, Colorado.com. Donate if you want to get rid of the MAGAs, of the Boeberts of the world, switching districts, just trying to keep political power. Or if you just want to push forward a true progressive agenda, something that I believe we need more of in this country. And Trisha, again, thank you very much for speaking with me. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much.